Freja, Overwatch's latest hero, is here and brings a bunch of cool lore with her arrival. Hey and welcome, I'm Hammy. We're going to be learning all about Freja's lore from her comic Storm Chaser, her short The Hunt Begins upon her release, and her bio on the website, as well as much more. As always, timecodes in the description below if you want to jump to different sections. Let's get stuck in. Now, we'll go through Freja's lore chronologically, going through the stories from the animated short and the comic as we go, but a couple of interesting topics to start with before we do so. First things first, her age. Now, on the website, she's clocked in at 34. Just want to shout out that a lot of the community had been chatting her age as being incorrect when it was cited potentially as being in her late 20s, but as far as I'm aware, that was an off-the-cuff attempt to remember by one of the Overwatch devs on one of the Creator Overwatch Stadium release event streams. So just to sort that one out pretty quickly, 34 as cited on the website is great. That's actually the same age as Farah, and you can kind of put her on a very similar timeline. I find it pretty interesting that we have these two the same age because one had a very different journey to the other. We know, of course, that Farah was kind of prevented or discouraged from joining Overwatch by Ana when she was a child, yet a lady exactly the same age as her daughter, Freja, was actively recruited by Ana, as we see in one of these panels from the comic. Now, Ana has, of course, apologised and discussed that with Farah since. Freja's age at 34 actually works really well with her comic. We see her being young with her mother in the first Omnic Crisis, and again, we can almost compare that kind of stage to Farah, of course, in the well-known photo from Anna's origin trailer. Freja, like Farah, is 5 years younger than Mercy, and just as a quick shout here on this one, this image was confirmed years ago to have Jack Morrison and Gabriel Rare's Soldier 76 and Reaper as looking a bit too young. It also has Emre in, of course, but more on him later. If we throw Freja's age into a bit of timelining, again we can put her on the same path as Farah. Given that Overwatch is cited in various lore materials as bringing 2 decades of peace to the world, and as of the events of Recall, roughly being 6 years since Overwatch was shut down, we have Freja joining Overwatch a little bit before the youngest of the Overwatch crew, like Tracer and Genji for example, and spending a bit more time in the organisation, which makes more sense in the comic panels to come. Okay, let's get into Freja's lore. Well, she is a child of the first Omnic Crisis. We see her in the comic panel as well as in her lore bio on the website, with her mother in the response to the attack on Denmark and in particular Copenhagen. Freja calls out in the comic the contrast between her mum's personality being calm, consistent, level-headed, and the eye of the storm in many ways, whereas Freja's comic is called Storm Chaser, showing how she wants to be involved and how she likes getting involved in action instead. Her study of criminology gave her the tools to find anyone in any place, as well as experience with her local search and rescue team before graduating and potentially being up for military recruitment. Now, complete speculation here, but if Freja did the standard 18 years old to 21 years old university higher education type thing, and then got recruited straight into Overwatch, for example, that could give her, well, nearly sort of 6 or 7 years in Overwatch before it actually fell. Recruited by Ana herself, as we see in the comics, in time, various members of the strike team, like Reinhardt, Mercy, and Emre indeed, came to request Freja by name, according to her bio, for their operations. She clearly made a very good reputation for herself. From the comic and from her website bio, it's also interesting to look at Freja's motivators. She in the comic likes completing jobs, doing something that mattered in her words, chasing a certain feeling of fulfillment and satisfaction, and interestingly, she's also a bit of a perfectionist. Apparently, despite her many triumphs, her few failures ate away at her conscience. Where others saw near perfection, she saw inadequacies, and she worked tirelessly, even obsessively, to correct them. I do wonder if that's a nod and we hear something about Freja and her personality and her kind of life in future. In her comic, we then see a bit of Freja's life in Overwatch, a mission that went well and a mission that went badly, to encapsulate and show off her time in the organisation. We see Freja in the first one leading the way with her search and rescue team, and cadets Winston and Tracer in their blue uniforms, as well as Emre. Emre, of course, one of the first recruits to Overwatch after the end of the Omnic Crisis in the original strike team, held in very high regard, and from various other lore sources, including Overwatch Declassified, deemed to be a very, very efficient and very, very capable fighter and operator. So no surprise that he's almost in the lead on this mission. The very fact that Winston and Tracer are in cadet uniform, lore-wise and timeline-wise, we can place it some point post-Uprising indeed, and certainly early in Tracer and Winston's Overwatch careers. So loving this, works out quite nicely, I think, for continuity as well. Another little note and thing that I enjoy is that we see Freya in many panels of these comics in the thick of the action and around all of the key strike team and most prominent Overwatch members, so she's very linked into the story. Because of her tenure in the organisation, we also know that Freya saw things go downhill, although by her own admission, she didn't really realise it while it was happening. A second good example of this is the Deepsea Raiders mission that we see Freya and the strike team and also Blackwatch on. Now, as a quick note on who the Deepsea Raiders are, they are effectively, or were, a bunch of eco-terrorists, now ostensibly campaigning against the pollution of the seas. The Polynesian League, the area in which they operated, was tasked with calming them down and failed to do so until Overwatch intervened a bit more historically. The Deepsea Raiders are, of course, very associated with Maunga in lore. His father led the Samoan branch of the eco-rebel group, and these are the ones that became like family, taught him a healthy dose of disrespect for the law, according to his bio, and of course were involved in him transforming into the hulk of a man that he is today. It's worth noting that the only other Deepsea Raiders operation that we know canonically of was one called Black Sand Fires. This is quoted around Maunga's story and also around interactions he has with Sojourn. It is, however, near or occurred near Tahiti, and is how Maunga eventually got his hands on his twin chain guns, presumably stealing them from Overwatch or in the aftermath of that mission. The one we see in Freya's comic, I think, has a background map, if you compare them here, of Samoa, taking the fight to the Deepsea Raiders, and might be why Freya is involved. Obviously, if Overwatch is doing an operation in Samoa, Freya is securing civilians and evacuating them before Overwatch strike out at the eco-rebels. Interesting panels here in a couple of ways. We see under Freya's sort of conversation saying that not everyone in Overwatch was perfect. We see Reinhardt very visibly fighting people here. Emre in the pre-mission briefing had stressed Freya clears out the civilians, and then once it's clear, they take the fight to them. So something went wrong here. Reinhardt obviously clearly in battle, and then afterwards in the debrief when Emre is talking to Morrison, presumably, they say that Reyes and his group pulled the fighting into the city before they could evacuate, and civilians died as a result. Freya's laser-like focus on doing her job meant that perhaps at the time she didn't see the warning signs of the organisation falling to pieces, even though she was living amongst them. Nice throwbacks in these comic panels, of course, to not only Soldier 76's origin trailer from many years ago, but also the images of the Overwatch Swiss HQ shown in the original Overwatch reveal cinematic at the museum many, many years ago. We then see in the aftermath of Overwatch's fall and much information coming out about all of the problems that it had, that Freya, amongst many other people, was a casualty of the actions of her superiors. Unable to get any kinds of employment, she took to becoming a bounty hunter. Interestingly, she initially took jobs that she said that Freya would have done, but finding that the name Freya and that her interests or motivations for the job were changing, she took the name, rather than have the Overwatch baggage surrounding her, of Gefn. She got back the rush of completing the job, one of her motivations, and saying that the actual financial reward mattered less than the challenge. She felt that the world she tried to help decided it was better off without her, and therefore she lives now in her criminal world. So finishing up with the comic and the bio lore, this brings us on nicely to The Hunt Begins, Freya's origin trailer. Now, although of course Freya was revealed at the Overwatch Showcase stream a while back, we did see a few teasers in-game that seemingly went unnoticed for a little while with an update, until after her reveal, I believe, a few folks went hunting for them in levels. So shout to the level scraping crew of Shroomy, Hazlet and Farland, I believe, who spotted these on Junkertown, Esperanza and Saravasa. Now, we have 3 different bounties named here, and you obviously see all of these data pads alongside things like the crossbow bolts and bolas. So we have Damian Barbosa, Machete Betty herself, and Sahil Bedia, the wolf, as he is known. The data pads are cool with details on how hard or easy the bounties will be to capture for Gefn, or Freya, of course. None of them seem particularly challenging, as well as a little bit about their habits. I do like Machete Betty's aficionado status for bladed objects, as it were. Having done jobs for an underground figure known as Marquis, Freya shows up to a meet with the 3 bounties and meets Max himself, the omnic behind the moniker. There has been a problem with payment for Freya's previous work. She took a cargo of Max's, seemingly in lieu of this, and Max is curious as to how Freya found the bounty so fast, decides he wants a demonstration, and orders his henchmen to attack Freya. Freya deals with the bodyguards in her Gefn persona very, very quickly, and we discover it's all a test. Max wanted to meet Freya in person to see if she was right for a particular job, and decides that she is, showing her the bounty that may interest her. It is of none other than Emre. Saying you should have led with this, Freya gets to work on the bounty. So that's Freya's lore. It's interesting to tie back once more into Freya's lore with Emre. Why is Max after Emre? We might have a few clues from the past of Emre in general and also Freya, but here's a bit more about him so we can end on a bit of speculation. We first saw Emre, who wasn't even named as such then, in the Ana Origin trailer that still I showed in the beginning of this video way back in 2016. Now, as a very early recruit, his combat skills, according to later lore, Overwatch Declassified, the Overwatch Lore Codex Bible released the other year, made him worthy of standing amongst these legends of Overwatch. Hailing from Turkey, Emre was into operations pretty quickly, having joined as one of the first Overwatch members, supplementing the original strike team post the first Omnic Crisis. In Operation White Dome, Brigitte's teaser of 2018, we saw him in action, and this is the mission where Torbjorn lost his arm. Now, Emre also served in Australia, according to Overwatch Declassified, helping Mercy and Sojourn with a humanitarian post-crisis mission, and also as part of the raid on the Shimada clan that brought Genji ultimately into Overwatch. Again, you can check these in Overwatch Declassified. So, we also see from Freya's lore that Emre was very involved in other Overwatch missions, kind of being the point person alongside Freya on some of these search and rescue related missions, or where search and rescue came in. Where is he now, and why might Max have beef with him? Well, the only little clue we have so far is that Sojourn, in one of her voice lines on Havana, has a voice line saying that Emre always said he wanted to retire there. And indeed we see Sojourn and Emre in that first Overwatch image from Ana's Origin trailer. Now, a lot's happened in Havana, none the least the events of Storm Rising. Remember that, the good old days. But as a place that obviously had ties with Talon and Max, we know from Max's The Pocket King story, or short story, pretty recently that he is sending data to someone in order to try and even the odds or turn the tables. He doesn't really approve of Doomfist having gambled Talon's future the way that he sees it. So at the end of Storm Rising, having turned over the location of Doomfist to Overwatch, leading to Doomfist's capture, in his recent short story, Max seems to be turning sides once again. Perhaps Emre has somehow got in the way of this, perhaps Emre is pursuing Max, perhaps thinking that Max is still involved with Talon in some way. And finally with Freya and Emre, why would Freya be interested in hunting Emre down? Well, she seemed to have quite a close working relationship with him in Overwatch. We see them alongside each other. She seemed to be quite sad when he left, even though she got on with her job. It'll be interesting to find out what closure Freya maybe is seeking, or whether she really doesn't care. Either way, Freya's release as a hero brings us a little bit further forward in some of the plots to do with Max and other story pieces that we've seen recently. It gives us a window into the workings of Overwatch, the downfall of Overwatch and problems it had, as well as some of its golden years activities. So a really cool hero release. Cool to see Freya's story and the way she fits into the world, her parallels with other characters, and how she pushes the story forward just a little bit. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you like this video, throw a like, subscribe, let me know in the comments how you found Freya's lore, how you're finding Overwatch lore right now. Now, in case you're new to my videos, I've been doing Overwatch lore for pretty much 10 years, ever since the game released. You can see interactions, comics, animated short analysis, panels from various conventions, everything to do with Overwatch lore over the best part of a decade I've tried to chat about here. So if you enjoy the story, love to hear your thoughts. And if you enjoy the lore and story of other games, I've been getting into those too. Some more videos here in the playlists. Cheers for tuning in. I've been Hammy. Take it easy.